Holger is our speaker today on the long-term solution, Appia. So Holger, if you want to bring some insights on that one, that can maybe help everybody. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. And we can go straight to the next slide. And that is actually something where I make a reference to what Paul had presented before on our exploratory work, because in the use cases put forward by market participants, I mean, we clearly saw, and it was really demonstrated, that leveraging the full benefit and the full potential of distributed ledger technology, it necessitates extending actually this use of new technology and accompanying procedures beyond the settlement and the related infrastructures. So that's a big point to have in mind, and which motivates actually the Appia track. In addition to market infrastructure and payments considerations, we will also have to look at the impact on central banks' policies. For example, how would then actually monetary policy implementation work? What has to change there? How can it use it? The regulatory framework has to look at, etc. It's also important to address the risk actually of fragmentation in a comprehensive way, and in a very holistic way, and in an integrated solution which covers actually and goes beyond also what Pontus will actually work on. So hence, in addition to the bridge of Pontus, we actually already now want to work on actually the road forward, so Appia, using that terminology of our names, with the objectives actually to have an environment that increases safety and efficiency across the financial ecosystem. We want to facilitate that the market is integrated and that there is actually further competition. And if we manage to set up an efficient and thriving innovative ecosystem for payments and also for securities use cases, we will actually make Europe actually an attractive place for financial investment, and hence, more or less coincidentally, actually will contribute to the international role of the euro when connecting to the rest of the world. So on the next slide, I will go into how could this look like, such an integrated solution of that we would actually propose under Appia, or actually and want to investigate then of how this could be done. So first, I would actually like to refer to the speech by our board member, Piero Cipollone, towards the Digital Capital Markets Union. You have a QR code here on the slide. It's on the speech is on our website. But what it, boils down to is actually what you see here, and we will develop the slide a bit further in this gray box, because this gray box has actually the functions as we have them for payments and also for securities already now. So we know that actually these functions, they will still be needed in the future, no matter who will provide them and how they are exactly offered. So, of course, looking at securities, so there needs to be an issuance function. There need to be notary or CSD services that are being offered. There would need to be custody of securities, trading, clearing. For wholesale transaction, also the central bank money settlement. There are also, if we think of, and you see actually the parties who are around here, so the central banks, issuers, FMIs, asset managers, investors, and commercial banks, some of them will directly want to use these functions, other indirectly, for example, investors, asset managers via banks. So all of these functions will need to be there. Now, how could this setup actually be set up? How could this be set up technically? So where we have actually these functions, also the central bank money, the commercial bank money very nicely integrated. If you go to the next version of this slide, please. So basically, the distributed ledger technology promise is that all of this could be seamlessly integrated. So if we think of, in the current parlance, if we think of apps, so they would have to be seamlessly integrated with each other. And that is crucial, which is why actually doing something individually like automation, etc., just for one function does not necessarily help the other. So that's the beauty of a DLT if one can really manage this seamless integration. Now, how could this be done? So we consider actually two main options from a technical point of view. The first one is a single ledger. So this gray box that you see is one ledger. And of course, then it's easy to see that if you have one ledger, one network for this, then actually that once you have established that, it's easy to work on it. You can have automation straight through processing, etc. Sounds easy. Of course, the challenging part of this is to decide exactly what of these functions are in there, how are they being worked out. What is also a challenge is actually to set up the governance for this, because not all the functions will be relevant for different people and different institutions. So the central bank will care a lot about the central bank money, settlement, notary service, custody, etc. will be taken. The private sector will be very interested in how would they offer the services. So there needs to be a shared governance. That's more complex to set this up. It would also be a shared ledger. Intuitively sounds at first sight, at least sounds more complex to also maintain it and keep it relevant and put innovation in there. Hence, we actually also want to investigate another approach. So actually that this gray box still, it should look and, whatever we come up with should look and feel like it is a single ledger, but it could also be that the functions are offered on different interoperable ledgers. Of course, for that one, it's important that it's actually easy, that one can connect this. So those things need to be taken care of. So that might be more easier than the single ledger to actually set up. It might be easier to update this over time because it would be done more locally. The individual ledgers could take care of that themselves. But of course, coordinating this is still complex and making it work. So this is actually something where we have to investigate which of these approaches is actually the better one. How would we do that? We would actually do that with an open mind and in an outcome-driven exploration. So that's why there are also, I've seen actually some of the technical question, what will be the technology for the future? At this moment, no, we don't know. And that needs to be part of the outcome of this, of how to do it once it's there. And of course, there's another thing, just to be sure, this is not just a technical exercise. All of this will also have to be, complemented by business rules, by other agreements, market practices, etc., that need to be agreed. Otherwise, it does not work seamlessly. And that's actually that is also an important question, because no matter how we will actually, whether it will be a single ledger or it will be an interoperable ledger, what we do know is we have to not only maintain, we have to step out our efforts that we are already doing on standardization, harmonization. Because even if you have one ledger, you don't have the same data format, you don't have different business practices, that ledger will not yield the right results. So those parts, also the business side, have to be complemented there. So that's very important. Another question is of how, is this actually a standalone thing? Is this the one ledger to rule them all, as some put it somewhere? Sometimes, no, it cannot be, and that is visible if we go to the next version of the slide. Yes, so it's clear that here this is actually while this works very much. On the domestic side, this gray box works well. Firstly, there's the point that how we are thinking of setting this up is not just for the euro. It is also we think from the start that this could also be used by EU central banks and central banks that are ready and willing to actually join this initiative. So that is actually something we are looking at from the start. So it's kind of multi-currency available, but it's also that to the rest of the world on the left-hand side, we want to be open because we want to have both. I mean, of course, there are investment abroad, there are incoming investments from abroad, so there need to be connections to the rest of the world. Similarly, also for domestic cases, of course, there can be specialized cases, specialized DLT networks that have their own needs. For example, it could be something on real estate. There could be the travel industry or other corporate things where we don't want to actually offer the services to them to make actually to make sure that we don't overfraud the put too much work on ourselves to accommodate what is needed there for their special needs, but they will want to pay. So there needs to be a link to actually them using, for example, commercial bank money, and maybe there are some automated payments that will involve then also somewhere in the chain actually central bank money settlement. So those connections need to be made. So interoperability to the outside is needed in any case. Okay, we can go to the next slide. How will this be done? So what we will do is, in any case, we will have a continuous involvement of the market in this. So this is not the central bank telling to the market. It's the same approach. It's the same approach as we have done before. So it's a public-private partnership that is necessary for this. Again, because some functions will be very relevant for the central bank directly, others will be more for the private sectors. So continuous market involvement on this, on Appia. We will want to facilitate the discussion actually by actually drafting a launch paper that we expect to publish early next year. So in the first half of next year. And we want to prepare it using actually our engagement with market and public stakeholders. We will align, of course, the Appia initiative with political objectives in Europe, also as mentioned before. And we will also want to run a general workshop to progress the analysis with the market. Now, for the launch paper, I come to that in more detail. So that will be used to explain more about our thinking of Appia, and then really the setup of Appia can start, because we will actually base then our work going forward on the experience we will have gained until that day, and of course also on the feedback actually that we will get on the Appia launch paper. Again, this will be a public-private partnership to work directly with relevant stakeholders to progress Appia under a joint governance. And we will then run also more deep dive workshops with interested stakeholders to progress on specific topics. And they may very well be clustered by themes, etc. So that's what we are thinking of at this moment. Of course, this plan, I mean, here I give you some indication on the launch paper. I mean, how long it takes, sorry, please stay on the slide, please, for a second. So then it will take some time to work out what we will be doing directly. And in the end, I do not know when, so certainly beyond 2027, then what we want to achieve is then later having a blueprint on how the gray box I showed on earlier slides, actually how this could be implemented. So do not expect the launch paper to be this blueprint. This is the start. The blueprint is actually the outcome of further work thereafter. And now we go to actually what can you more expect on the launch paper on the next slide. And there we will want to actually explain the scope of Appia, so the overview of its objectives, the area of focus, and with an emphasis on fostering innovation while ensuring the security of the wholesale financial markets. We will explain more the adopted analysis and the methodology that will be used to guide our analysis. But one thing is clear, it will be much will be evidence-based. So it's not only analytical and desktop research. There will also be actually then for the methodology. I mean, we will actually have then also really evidence-based analysis. And the considerations for the infrastructure and the ecosystem development are also important. So the launch paper will contain actually foundational principles for the infrastructure design, access mechanism, and also the ecosystem and then interoperability. As said, this is needed no matter whether we go for an interoperability approach within this gray box or whether we actually use a single ledger. Then the next steps on the governance framework will also be explained there somewhat more. So more also on the timeline and the joint public-private governance framework. So I cannot answer detailed questions on this yet, just to anticipate this as well. Now on the next slide, what we show here are considerations for the next step. So starting on the upper left corner, going clockwise. So we are thinking of a collaborative actually approach that we want to do. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, it will be a public-private stakeholder engagement. There's also international cooperation. The links are obvious. So we are following also with different degrees of intensity, also international projects, because precisely we need to find ways also for connecting internationally. Also for this one, the harmonization aspect, standardization, also internationally, also for cross-border payments, etc., are very much needed. So this is actually very important. So it's collaborative both inside Europe, but also to the outside. Again, it's not only on technology, it's a full ecosystem approach that is needed. So it's also a holistic approach across the value chain. So it is really looking into business perspectives, policy implications also of DLT. We will have really targeted practical work. So we will, of course, then also together with the market advance on clarifying what questions do we need to answer. That's also where feedback on the launch paper will be important. We will make some design proposals then together for the jointly and test and ideas on how this could look like. And then our idea is, and our plan is to actually test those ideas in order to actually set up a blueprint. And again, this will require also questions like, what standards do we need and how do we achieve them? Because again, it's not only a technology work, it is actually really something also involving very much the business. So that's very, very important for this. And hence, this is also what we cover in this question. I mean, with this question of, do we include a shared ledger? Will it be an interoperability solution? Again, at this moment, we don't know. It will be evidence-based. What we do know, again, is that policy considerations, standardization, harmonization efforts, they will be very important no matter what the solution is. And on the rest, we are actually very open and very interested to actually have an innovative setup and work, central banks with market participants, then on this to make actually an improved ecosystem happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Holger. So we are running out of time, unfortunately, because we have about 1 million questions. So we may need to do more sessions after the summer. So stay with us. But I think, Holger, you answered a lot of the questions already about involvement and how people can engage in this one too. But there's also a question on, and I think it tackles a little bit back to where Dimitri started at the beginning with the triangle, the magic triangle. And the question is on this DLT-based assets and whether the ECB will make such assets eligible as collateral, and by when.
Yes.
So I don't know if you can say anything about this already.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, this is actually something which is in general necessary for the central bank to actually look into those questions, also to keep up to date. It's not only about settlement in central bank money where we want to offer it in a relevant way. Also, if we think of the collateral framework of the euro system, we have to think about how is that developing, which we do, of course, together with our colleagues from the market operations side on this. Just to be clear, so we are systematically engaging with the market participants in the field of this issuance and settlement and analyze. So it's an ongoing exercise we are doing as part of our work. Actually, we are analyzing of how to make them eligible. So what are the questions? Given that there is inside the eligibility framework that we have for our Eurosystem credit operations. So given that there's a diverse universe of DLT-based securities, we split this work actually in two work streams. The first one is actually addressing minor clarifications in our framework for assets, which are already in principle meeting or can meet our existing criteria. So this is in particular for those assets that are being issued in eligible CSDs and are available for settlement in T2S. That's the easier work stream to implement. So the second is a bit more complex because for all other type of assets that are not issued in CSDs and are not available for settlement in T2S, there we will actually need to reflect on how we could review and update our framework while respecting the principles of a level playing field and also the adequacy and safety of public funds and efficiency. So that's a more complex one that will take more time. So that will also not always be dependent on us and on the evolution of will also depend on the evolution of the European regulatory framework. And I also would like to point out there, for example, the review of the DLT pilot regime. Settlement Finality Directive, Financial Collateral Directive. So those we will have to follow there as well and may also make use of. So, and in addition, in particular for the second work stream, there are also operational questions which will also arise for these assets on whether and how the Eurosystem can join market DLT platforms, either as a participants and based on what criteria, and also on how to operationally prepare ourselves for this, or finding other ways. I mean, our common Eurosystem collateral management system went live 4 weeks ago. It is, of course, implemented what was agreed on a while ago. So it was not designed to connect directly to DLT platform. It was designed to connect to T2S. So that's something we would also, from a practical point of view, have to work on. So on the first part, the assets which are already fitting to our framework. So that's something we are working on now. I would hope that that actually next year there's a solution found for those points. For others, it may take then a longer time. But again, this is not an official ECB statement. This is just from a kind of expert perspective, my take of what it takes for the timeline.